Rain had never felt more like a gift than it did the moment. Harrison Edwards held his umbrella over a stranger who looked like she might drown in her own exhaustion. That was 7 days ago, and now Aurora Collins stood in the lobby of Edwards' manufacturing headquarters, clutching that same black umbrella and wondering if she had lost her mind. The receptionist looked at her with polite confusion. "Do you have an appointment?" Aurora shifted her weight from one foot to the other, suddenly aware of how out of place she seemed in her coffee-stained barista apron and worn sneakers. "No, I just need to return something to Mr. Edwards. He lent me his umbrella last week during that storm." The receptionist's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Mr. Edwards personally lent you his umbrella?" "Yes. I was walking home from work and got caught in the downpour. He stopped his car and insisted I take it." Aurora felt heat rise to her cheeks as she remembered that evening. She had been crying, actually crying in the rain like some dramatic movie scene, after receiving the call that her mother's medical bills had doubled, and the payment plan she had arranged was no longer sufficient. The storm had seemed fitting for her mood, punishment even, until a sleek black car had pulled up beside her, and a man with dark hair and concerned eyes had stepped out. The receptionist picked up her phone. "Let me see if Mr. Edwards is available." Aurora waited, her fingers tight around the umbrella handle. She had meant to return it sooner, but between her 3 jobs and visiting her mother at the care facility, the week had slipped away. Then last night, her roommate had mentioned seeing Edwards Manufacturing on the news, some feature about Harrison Edwards being one of the youngest billionaires in the manufacturing industry. And Aurora had realized the man who had given her his umbrella was not just some kind stranger, but someone impossibly wealthy and important. "Miss Collins," a woman in a sharp gray suit appeared from a hallway. "I'm Patricia Wells, Mr. Edwards' executive assistant. He's asked me to bring you up." Aurora's stomach flipped. "Oh, I can just leave the umbrella with you. I don't want to take up his time." Patricia smiled, something knowing in her expression. "He insists. Please follow me." They rode the elevator to the 20th floor in silence. Aurora caught her reflection in the polished doors and winced. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her shirt had a visible stain from when someone had bumped her elbow during the morning rush at the cafe. She looked exactly like what she was, a tired 24-year-old woman working herself into the ground. The elevator doors opened to a sleek office space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Patricia led her past several offices and conference rooms before stopping at a double door at the end of the hall. "Go ahead in," Patricia said, knocking once before opening the door. Harrison Edwards stood from behind an enormous desk, and Aurora felt that same strange jolt she had experienced a week ago. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that was perfectly styled but looked like it would be soft to touch. His jaw was sharp, his shoulders broad beneath an expensive navy suit, and his eyes were the kind of blue that made you forget what you were saying mid-sentence. "Aurora," he said, and her name sounded different in his voice, warmer somehow. "I'm glad you came." "I'm sorry it took me so long to return this," she said quickly, holding out the umbrella. "I meant to bring it back sooner, but work has been crazy and it's fine." He walked around the desk, taking the umbrella from her but not looking at it. His eyes stayed on her face. "I was starting to think I wouldn't see you again." Something in his tone made her heart skip. "Well, I couldn't keep it. It's clearly expensive, and you were so kind to lend it to me." "Kind." He repeated the word like he was testing it. "I don't think I've ever been called kind in a business profile." Aurora managed a small smile. "I guess the business world sees a different side of you." "They do." He set the umbrella aside, leaning against his desk in a way that was casual despite the formal setting. How have you been? You seemed upset that night. She had hoped he wouldn't remember that detail. I'm fine, just having a rough day. Just that one day, his perception caught her off guard. Mostly that day. Harrison studied her for a moment, and Aurora had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through her deflection. Have you had lunch? What? Lunch. Have you eaten? I had a granola bar between shifts. He shook his head, something like disapproval crossing his features. That's not lunch. Come with me. I can't. I have to be at my second job in an hour. How many jobs do you have? Aurora hesitated. 3. His expression darkened, but not with anger. Something else, something that looked almost like concern. Then you can spare 30 minutes to eat a proper meal. I'll make sure you're not late. She should have said no. Should have thanked him again and left, returned to her carefully balanced chaos of a life. But there was something about the way he looked at her, like she mattered, like her answer was important, that made her nod. They ate at a restaurant 3 blocks from his office, the kind of place where the menus had no prices and the waiters moved like dancers. Aurora felt desperately out of place, but Harrison seemed determined to make her comfortable, asking about her work, her interests, carefully avoiding whatever had made her cry in the rain. I work at a cafe in the morning, a bookstore in the afternoon, and I do freelance graphic design at night, she told him, picking at her salmon. It's a lot, but the bills don't stop coming. Your mother, he said quietly. The care facility. She looked up sharply. How did you know? You mentioned it. That night. You said something about the facility calling. Aurora had forgotten. The memory of that evening was a blur of rain and unexpected kindness. She has early onset Alzheimer's. She's only 53, but she can't live alone anymore. The care facility is expensive, but it's the best in the area and she deserves the best. Harrison's jaw tightened. And you're supporting her alone. My father passed away when I was 16. There's no one else. He was quiet for a moment, his fork suspended over his plate. That's a heavy burden for someone so young. I'm not that young, I'm 24, still. His eyes met hers. You shouldn't have to carry it alone. Something warm unfurled in Aurora's chest, dangerous and terrifying. I manage. I can see that, but managing and living are different things. She wanted to argue, but the truth of his words settled over her like a weight. When was the last time she had done something just for herself? When had she last gone to a movie, met friends for drinks, done anything that wasn't work or obligation? Harrison paid the bill despite her protests and walked her back toward the business district where she needed to catch her bus. On the sidewalk outside a boutique, he stopped and turned to her. Have dinner with me, he said. Aurora's breath caught. What? Tomorrow night. Or whenever you're free. Have dinner with me. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because you're a billionaire and I'm barely keeping my head above water. Because you're sophisticated and successful and I'm wearing a stained shirt and shoes with a hole in the sole. Because I don't have time for complications and you feel like the most beautiful complication I could imagine. We're from different worlds, she said instead. I don't care about that. You should. He stepped closer and she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy. Aurora, I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night. I kept hoping you'd come back. The umbrella was an excuse, a thread connecting us. Please don't cut it yet. Her heart hammered against her ribs. I work every day. I don't have time for dating. Then let me take you to breakfast before your cafe shift, or coffee during your break. I'll work around your schedule. Why? The question burst out of her, raw and confused. Why do you care? You could have anyone. Harrison's hand lifted, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face, and the gentle touch sent electricity down her spine. Because when I saw you standing in the rain, looking like the world had beaten you down but you were still standing, still fighting, I saw something real. something I've been looking for without knowing it, and I don't want to let it go without trying. Aurora knew she should walk away, knew that letting this man into her life would be complicated and probably painful. But she was so tired of being alone, of fighting every battle by herself, and the way he looked at her made her feel like she was worth fighting for. "Wednesday," she heard herself say. "I have Wednesday evenings off." His smile transformed his face, turning him from intimidating billionaire to something younger, more hopeful. "Wednesday. I'll pick you up at 7. She gave him her address, then rushed to catch her bus, her heart racing the entire ride. The bookstore shift passed in a daze. Her coworker, Marcus, noticed immediately. "Why do you look like you've been hit by lightning?" he asked, shelving returns beside her. "I think I have a date." "You think?" "I definitely have a date, with the umbrella guy." Marcus nearly dropped his stack of books. "The one from last week. The one who drove off in a car worth more than our annual salary. That's the one." "Aurora, please tell me you Googled him." She had, actually, on her phone during her lunch break. The results had been overwhelming. Harrison Edwards, 32 years old, CEO of Edwards Manufacturing, which produced high-end commercial equipment for restaurants and hotels worldwide. Net worth estimated at $3 billion. Eligible bachelor, according to multiple gossip sites. A few linked relationships over the years, but nothing serious, nothing that stuck. "I Googled him," she confirmed. "And you said yes anyway." "I said yes anyway." Marcus grinned. "Good. You deserve something good, Aurora. You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are." But Wednesday felt simultaneously too far away and too close. Aurora went through her days in a strange haze, working her shifts, visiting her mother, doing design work late into the night. Her mother had good days and bad days. On Tuesday, Aurora sat beside her bed at the facility, holding her hand while her mother looked at her with confused eyes. "I know you," her mother said slowly. "You're important to me." "I'm Aurora, Mom. I'm your daughter." "Aurora." Her mother tested the name. "That's pretty. Like the Northern Lights. You named me that because Dad proposed to you on a trip to Alaska, remember? You saw the Aurora Borealis and said it was the most beautiful thing you had ever seen." Her mother smiled vaguely, the memory gone but the emotion perhaps still there. "The Northern Lights. That sounds nice." Aurora stayed until her mother fell asleep, then cried in her car for 10 minutes before driving home. These visits were getting harder, watching her mother slip further away, knowing that soon she might not recognize Aurora at all. When Wednesday arrived, Aurora was a bundle of nerves. She had exactly 3 outfits that could be considered date-appropriate, and only one that was nice enough for wherever Harrison might take her. A simple black dress that she had bought 2 years ago for a friend's wedding, paired with her only heels and a cardigan to hide the fact that the dress was slightly too tight in the shoulders. Harrison arrived at exactly 7, knocking on the door of her small apartment with flowers in hand. Real flowers, not a generic bouquet but a careful arrangement of white roses and blue hydrangeas. "You look beautiful," he said, and the way he said it made her believe him despite her discount dress and borrowed jewelry. "You look pretty good yourself," she managed, which was an understatement. He wore dark slacks and a gray button-down with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, somehow managing to look both casual and impossibly elegant. He took her to a rooftop restaurant where fairy lights were strung between trees planted in enormous pots, and the city sprawled below them like a carpet of stars. It was magical and intimate, and Aurora felt herself relaxing as they talked, sharing stories and laughs over wine and pasta. Harrison told her about growing up in his father's shadow, expected to take over the family business before he was old enough to know what he wanted. How he had resented it at first, then found his own passion in manufacturing, in creating quality products and building a company culture that treated employees like people rather than resources. "My father ran the company like a tyrant," Harrison said, swirling his wine. "People were afraid of him. When I took over after he retired, half the executive team expected me to be the same. It took years to change that culture, to build trust." "But you did it," Aurora said. "I did. Though according to some of the old guard, I'm too soft. Too concerned with things like work-life balance and fair wages." "Sounds terrible," she teased. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I'm a real monster." Aurora found herself sharing things she rarely talked about. Her dreams of being a designer, which had been put on hold when her mother got sick. The guilt she felt sometimes, wondering if she was doing enough, if she should have found a way to keep her mother at home instead of in a facility. "You're doing more than enough," Harrison said firmly. "You're working 3 jobs to give her the best care possible. That's not something to feel guilty about. It doesn't always feel like enough." He reached across the table, taking her hand. His palm was warm, his grip steady. "I know we just met, but I can already tell you're the kind of person who would give everything for the people you love. That's rare. That's special." The evening stretched on, neither of them wanting it to end. When Harrison finally drove her home, he walked her to her door but didn't push for anything more than a gentle kiss on her cheek. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation this time. They fell into a pattern over the next few weeks. Harrison would meet her for breakfast before her cafe shift, showing up with pastries from a bakery he had discovered, and coffee that was somehow always exactly how she liked it. He would stop by the bookstore during her afternoon shift, pretending to browse while really just finding excuses to talk to her. On her evenings off, they would have dinner, sometimes at fancy restaurants, sometimes at small hole-in-the-wall places that Harrison discovered through meticulous research. He was thoughtful in ways Aurora had never experienced. When she mentioned loving old movies, he rented out a private theater and screened Casablanca. When she said she missed painting, something she had given up years ago due to lack of time and money, he showed up at her apartment with a full set of professional supplies. "You can't do this," she protested, looking at the expensive brushes and paints. "This is too much." "It's not too much. It's barely anything." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I want you to have space for the things you love. I want you to have room to breathe." She kissed him then, really kissed him for the first time, and it felt like falling and flying simultaneously. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and everything else fell away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you," he said quietly. "I need you to know that. This isn't casual for me." "It's not casual for me either," she whispered back. But reality intruded as it always did. Aurora's mother had a bad episode, becoming agitated and confused, not recognizing the staff. The facility called Aurora at work, and she had to leave her bookstore shift early, apologizing profusely to Marcus. Harrison found her in the parking lot of the care facility 2 hours later. She had texted him that she couldn't make their dinner plans, and somehow he had figured out where she was. "You didn't have to come," she said, exhausted and emotionally wrung out. "I wanted to." He pulled her into his arms and she let herself lean against his chest, drawing strength from his steady heartbeat. "How is she?" Sedated. "Resting. They said it happens sometimes as the disease progresses." "She'll have more episodes like this." "And how are you?" The question broke something in her. "I'm tired, Harrison. I'm so tired of watching her disappear, of working constantly and still feeling like I'm drowning, of being alone with this." "You're not alone," he said firmly. "Not anymore." "I'm here, Aurora. I'm not going anywhere." She wanted to believe him, but a small voice in her head whispered that this couldn't last, that eventually he would realize she was too much work, too much baggage, not worth the effort. As if reading her thoughts, Harrison tilted her chin up, making her meet his eyes. "I know what you're thinking. You're wrong. It's not going anywhere unless you want it to. I'm in this for real. We've only known each other for a month. And I've learned more about what I want in that month than in the past decade. I want you, Aurora. All of you, including the hard parts." She kissed him again, desperate and grateful and terrified all at once. Harrison started helping in ways that felt natural rather than overbearing. He would pick up dinner for her after long shifts, leaving it at her door with sweet notes when she was too tired for company. He researched Alzheimer's care obsessively, sharing articles and information about new treatments and therapies. When Aurora mentioned that the facility was increasing their rates again, he casually mentioned that he knew the director and might be able to negotiate a better payment plan. "You can't do that," Aurora protested. "Why not? I have connections. Why shouldn't you benefit from them?" "Because it feels like charity." They were in his penthouse apartment, which Aurora had finally agreed to visit. It was stunning, all clean lines and expensive furniture, with a view that made her feel like she was floating above the city. Harrison set down his wine glass and turned to face her fully. "It's not charity to let someone who cares about you help. It's not weakness to accept support. You've been doing everything alone for so long that you've forgotten what it's like to have a partner. We've been dating for 6 weeks. And I'm in love with you." The world seemed to stop spinning. Aurora stared at him, her heart in her throat. "What? I'm in love with you," he repeated, calmer now, more certain. "I know it's fast. I know we're still learning each other, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I love your strength and your kindness. I love how you fight for the people you care about. I love your laugh and the way you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating. I love you, Aurora." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too. God, I love you too, and it terrifies me." He crossed to her, wiping away her tears with gentle fingers. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I keep waiting for you to realize I'm not worth it, that I'm too complicated, too broke, too exhausted, that you could have someone easier." "I don't want easier, I want you." He kissed her then, deep and slow, and Aurora felt herself surrendering to the truth of it. This was real. He was real. And maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to have something good. Things shifted after that confession. The relationship deepened, became something solid and unshakable. Harrison met her mother during one of her good days, sitting beside her bed and listening patiently as she told rambling stories about Aurora's childhood. Aurora met Harrison's small circle of close friends, including his business partner Daniel and his wife Sophie, who immediately pulled Aurora aside to tell her they had never seen Harrison this happy. "He's been married to his work for years," Sophie said over drinks while the men talked business. "We were starting to think he'd forgotten how to have a personal life. Then he met you, and suddenly he's leaving the office at reasonable hours and smiling at his phone like a teenager." Aurora blushed. "I didn't mean to disrupt his work. Disrupt away. He needed disrupting." Sophie squeezed her hand. "You're good for him. Anyone can see that." The months passed in a blur of happiness punctuated by challenges. Aurora's mother continued to decline, and there were more emergency calls, more difficult visits. But Harrison was always there, offering support without trying to fix everything, understanding that sometimes she just needed him to hold her while she cried. He also started gently pushing her to think about her own future beyond just survival. "What would you do if money wasn't an object?" he asked one night as they lay tangled together in his bed. "That's an impossible question. Humor me." Aurora thought about it, really thought. I'd want to finish my design degree. Maybe start my own business doing branding and graphic design for small companies. I've always loved helping people bring their visions to life, so do it. Harrison, I can't afford to quit my jobs and go back to school. What if you could? She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. What are you suggesting? Let me pay for your mother's care. Let me handle those bills so you can focus on building the life you want. Absolutely not. Why not? Because that's not fair to you. Because I'm not with you for your money. Because I need to take care of my own responsibilities. Harrison sat up, his expression serious. I know you're not with me for money. If anything, you fight me every time I try to do anything nice for you. But Aurora, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me use it for something that matters. Let me invest in your future, in us. It's too much. It's not enough. He took her hands. I love you. I want to build a life with you, and I can't do that when you're working yourself into exhaustion. Please, let me help. It went against every independent instinct she had, but Aurora also couldn't deny the appeal of what he was offering. The chance to breathe, to dream, to actually live instead of just survive. On one condition, she said finally, anything. We draw up a contract. I pay you back someday, even if it takes years. Harrison looked like he wanted to argue, but he must have seen the determination in her eyes. Fine. We'll draw up a contract, though I'm going to charge 0% interest, 5%, 1%, 3%. Deal. He kissed her, and Aurora felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she hadn't even realized she was carrying. True to his word, Harrison arranged for his lawyers to handle everything. The contract was written up, professional and binding, though Aurora suspected the terms were far more generous than they would be with anyone else. He also connected her with the financial aid office at the local university, helping her navigate the process of re-enrolling in their design program. Within 2 months, Aurora had quit 2 of her 3 jobs, keeping only the bookstore position because she genuinely enjoyed it, and Marcus would have been devastated if she left entirely. She started classes part-time, balancing coursework with visits to her mother and time with Harrison. It felt like learning to breathe again. She painted in the evenings, took long walks without checking her watch constantly, met friends for lunch like a normal person. Harrison watched her blossom with satisfaction, telling her repeatedly how proud he was of her. They were having dinner at his place, celebrating the end of her first semester back at school, when Harrison pulled out a small velvet box. Aurora's heart stopped. "Harrison, wait," he said quickly. "This isn't what you think. I mean, it's not that yet. I want to marry you, Aurora. I want to spend my life with you. But I also know we've talked about taking things at a pace that feels right for both of us, and I don't want to rush you." He opened the box, revealing a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm in the shape of an umbrella. Aurora laughed, tears springing to her eyes. "An umbrella! To remember how we started. That storm brought you to me, and I'm grateful for it every single day." He fastened the bracelet around her wrist. "This is a promise. When you're ready, when the time is right, I'm going to ask you properly. But for now, I want you to wear this and know that I'm yours, completely and forever." She kissed him through her tears, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of it, the perfection. "I love you so much. I love you too." The next year unfolded like a dream. Aurora thrived in school, her professors praising her work and connecting her with internship opportunities. Her mother's condition stabilized somewhat, the excellent care at the facility maintaining her quality of life, even as her memory continued to fade. Harrison continued to be the steady presence Aurora had never known she needed, supporting her ambitions while building his own company to new heights. They traveled together when Aurora had breaks from school, Harrison introducing her to places she had only dreamed of seeing. Paris, Tokyo, Barcelona. He delighted in her wonder, in showing her the world she had sacrificed to take care of her mother. "Thank you," she told him one night in Rome, standing on their hotel balcony overlooking the Colosseum. "For what? For seeing me when I was invisible. For loving me when I couldn't imagine anyone would. For giving me space to become who I'm meant to be." Harrison wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "You were never invisible, Aurora. You were standing in the rain, shining like a beacon. I just happened to be looking the right direction." When Aurora graduated with her design degree, Harrison rented out an entire restaurant for the celebration, inviting her friends, his friends, colleagues from both their worlds. Her mother was having a bad day and couldn't attend, but Harrison had arranged for a professional photographer to visit the facility later with Aurora in her cap and gown, capturing a moment even if her mother wouldn't fully understand it. "I'm so proud of you," Harrison said during his toast, his eyes locked on Aurora. "You're the strongest, most determined person I know, and watching you achieve your dreams has been the greatest privilege of my life." She cried, of course. Happy tears this time, surrounded by people who loved her and celebrated her success. 2 weeks later, Harrison took her back to the exact spot where they had met, the street corner where his car had pulled up beside her in the rain. It was a beautiful summer evening, warm and clear, tourists and locals alike flowing past them on the sidewalk. "Do you remember this place?" he asked. "Of course. This is where you changed my life." "Where we changed each other's lives," he corrected. He took both her hands, and Aurora's heart began to race as she realized what was happening. "Aurora Collins, you walked into my life during a storm, and you've been my sunshine ever since. You've taught me what it means to love selflessly, to fight for what matters, to live fully instead of just existing. I don't want to spend another day without knowing you'll be by my side forever." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that caught the evening light, a simple platinum band with a single perfect diamond. "Will you marry me?" Aurora couldn't speak through her tears, could only nod frantically as she pulled him up and kissed him. Around them, people clapped and cheered, strangers celebrating the joy of two people in love. "Yes," she finally managed to say. "Yes, yes, yes." The ring slid onto her finger perfectly, and Aurora felt the final piece of her life clicking into place. She had been so afraid of letting Harrison in, so convinced that happiness wasn't meant for people like her. But here she was, loved and supported and free to be fully herself. They married 6 months later in a ceremony that was both elegant and intimate. Sophie stood as Aurora's maid of honor, while Daniel served as Harrison's best man. Aurora's mother attended, wheeled in by 2 nurses from the facility. She seemed confused by the celebration but smiled when she saw Aurora in her wedding dress. "You look like a princess," her mother said, a moment of clarity in her eyes. "Thanks, Mom," Aurora whispered, kneeling beside the wheelchair to hug her. The ceremony was held in a garden, fairy lights strung between trees, white roses everywhere. When Aurora walked down the aisle and saw Harrison waiting for her, his eyes bright with emotion, she felt like the luckiest person alive. Their vows were personal, heartfelt. Harrison promised to always be her shelter in the storm, to support her dreams, to love her in the hard moments and the easy ones. Aurora promised to let him in, to trust his love, to build a life of partnership and joy together. When they kissed as husband and wife, sealing their commitment, Aurora thought back to that rainy night when she had been at her lowest point. She had never imagined that accepting a stranger's umbrella would lead to this, to everything. Married life suited them. They moved into a new house together, something between Harrison's penthouse and Aurora's small apartment. A real home with space for Aurora's studio and Harrison's home office, with guest rooms for friends and a garden where they could have morning coffee. Aurora launched her design business, starting small but quickly building a reputation for thoughtful, creative branding. Harrison was her biggest cheerleader, showing off her work to anyone who would listen and occasionally using his connections to introduce her to potential clients, though he was careful not to overstep. "I'm not trying to interfere," he told her after mentioning that his friend was opening a new restaurant and needed branding. "I just think you'd be perfect for the job, but only if you want it." "I want it," Aurora assured him, kissing his cheek. "And I appreciate you believing in me enough to recommend me." Her business grew steadily. Within 2 years, she had a small team working with her and a client list that made her proud. She made sure to take on some pro bono work too, helping small nonprofits and community organizations that couldn't afford high-end design services. Harrison supported this fully, understanding that giving back was important to her. Aurora's mother passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning when Aurora was 28. It was peaceful, the nurses said. She simply went to sleep and didn't wake up. Aurora grieved, but there was also relief mixed with the sadness. Her mother had been slipping away for years. In some ways, this was just the final goodbye to someone she had been losing in pieces. Harrison held her through the grief, took care of the funeral arrangements when Aurora couldn't face them, sat beside her at the service, and squeezed her hand when the tears came. Afterward, at the reception, he made sure she ate, gently redirected well-meaning relatives who wanted to share their own stories when Aurora clearly needed space, and eventually drove her home and held her while she cried. "I knew it was coming," she said into his chest. "I've been preparing for this for years, so why does it hurt so much? Because she was your mother. Because loving someone means being hurt when they're gone. It's the price we pay, and it's worth it." Aurora looked up at him, this man who had become her everything. "I'm so glad I have you. I don't know how I would survive this alone. You'll never have to find out. I'm here always." The grief softened over time, becoming something she could carry rather than something that crushed her. She threw herself into her work, into her marriage, into building the life she and Harrison had dreamed of. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Harrison surprised her with a trip back to Rome, to the hotel where they had stood on the balcony overlooking the Colosseum. "This is where I knew for certain," he told her over dinner. "That trip, watching you experience everything with such joy and wonder, I knew I wanted to spend my whole life seeing the world through your eyes." "I think I knew before that," Aurora admitted. "I think I knew when you gave me the umbrella bracelet. That was when I realized you understood me better than anyone ever had." Harrison took her hand, his thumb rubbing over her wedding ring. "I have something to tell you, and I want you to hear it without panicking." Aurora's stomach flipped. "That's a terrible way to start a conversation," he laughed. "Fair. Okay, here it is. I've been thinking a lot about legacy, about what we're building together. The company is doing well. Your business is thriving. We have this incredible life, and I want to expand that life. I want children with you, Aurora. I want to raise kids who have your kindness and creativity, who learn what real love looks like by watching us. But only if you want that too. No pressure, no timeline. Just me telling you what I'm hoping for in our future." Aurora felt tears prick her eyes, but these were happy tears. "I want that too. I've been afraid to bring it up, worried you might not want kids." "Are you kidding? I want everything with you. Kids, chaos, decades of memories, all of it." They started trying when they got home from Rome, and 6 months later, Aurora found herself staring at a positive pregnancy test with shaking hands. Harrison's reaction when she told him was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing and crying simultaneously, then immediately started worrying about whether she should be eating more protein and if the guest room would make a good nursery. "We have 9 months to figure it out," Aurora reminded him, amused by his sudden anxiety. 9 months is nothing. We need to start preparing now. Pregnancy suited Aurora. She glowed, according to everyone who saw her, and while there were uncomfortable moments and morning sickness that lasted well past the first trimester, she felt deeply connected to the life growing inside her. Harrison was attentive to the point of being comical, reading every pregnancy book he could find and treating Aurora like she might break at any moment. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she told him when he insisted on carrying all the groceries while she carried nothing. "I know, but humor me. I want to take care of you." Their daughter was born on a snowy January morning, tiny and perfect with Harrison's dark hair and Aurora's green eyes. They named her Amelia Rose, and from the moment Harrison held her, Aurora knew their family was complete. Well, mostly complete. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Henry James, who came into the world screaming and didn't stop until Harrison sang him some made-up lullaby about umbrellas and rainstorms that made Aurora laugh through her exhaustion. Life became beautifully chaotic. Aurora scaled back her business hours, taking on fewer clients so she could be present for her children while still maintaining the career she loved. Harrison did the same, delegating more at work and making sure he was home for dinner every night, for bath time and bedtime stories, and the million tiny moments that made up a life. They had help, of course. A nanny who came 3 days a week to give Aurora time to work. A housekeeper who managed the chaos of a home with 2 small children. But Harrison and Aurora were hands-on parents, determined to give their kids not just material comfort but genuine presence and love. On particularly chaotic days when both kids were crying and the house was a disaster and Aurora felt like she might lose her mind, Harrison would pull her aside and kiss her forehead. "Remember when you were standing in the rain," he would say. "I remember. This is better, right?" Even when it's hard. And it was. So much better. The chaos was beautiful because it was theirs, built on a foundation of love and partnership that had started with a simple act of kindness on a storm-drenched street. When Amelia was 5 and Henry was 3, Aurora organized a charity gala to raise money for Alzheimer's research and care facilities. Harrison supported the event fully, using his business connections to secure donations and attendance from the city's elite. The gala raised $500,000, and Aurora gave a speech about her mother, about the importance of quality care and continued research. "My mother never got to meet my children," Aurora said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "But her influence lives on through the values she instilled in me. Love, kindness, resilience. And through events like this, we can help other families have more time, better care, and hopefully one day a cure. Thank you all for being here, for opening your hearts and wallets to this cause." Harrison watched her from the side of the stage, his eyes bright with pride. Later, when the event was over and they were driving home, he told her, "You were magnificent tonight. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become." "I hope so. I like to think she would have loved seeing me this happy." "I have no doubt." The years continued to unfold in a tapestry of ordinary moments and extraordinary love. Amelia started kindergarten with Aurora's creativity and Harrison's determination, diving into art projects and reading with equal enthusiasm. Henry was all boundless energy and mischief, keeping them constantly on their toes but filling their home with laughter. Aurora's business continued to grow, her reputation as a designer spreading beyond their city. She won several industry awards and was featured in design magazines. But what mattered most to her were the thank-you notes from small business owners whose companies had thrived because of her branding work. Harrison remained successful in his own right, expanding Edwards' manufacturing internationally while maintaining the ethical company culture he had worked so hard to build. He made sure his employees had excellent benefits, fair wages, and work-life balance. His competitors sometimes mocked him for it, but his employee retention rates and productivity spoke for themselves. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they returned once again to that street corner where everything had begun. The kids were with Harrison's parents for the weekend, giving Aurora and Harrison rare time alone. 10 years, Aurora said, leaning against his shoulder as they stood on the familiar sidewalk. Can you believe it? Sometimes it feels like we've been together forever. Other times it feels like yesterday that you walked into my office with that umbrella. I was so nervous that day, I almost just left it with the receptionist. I'm glad you didn't, though I would have found another excuse to see you if you had. Aurora laughed. Would you really? Absolutely. I would have tracked you down somehow. You can't show someone a glimpse of something real and then expect them to just let it go. She turned to face him fully, her hands coming up to frame his face. You changed my life, Harrison Edwards. You saw me when I was invisible, loved me when I felt unlovable, and gave me space to become who I was always meant to be. I love you more today than I did when we got married, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today. That's my line, he said softly, kissing her. I love you, Aurora Edwards, my umbrella girl, my wife, the mother of my children, my everything. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms on the street where they had met, a light rain began to fall. Aurora laughed, tilting her face up to feel the drops. Should we run for cover? Harrison asked. Not yet. Let's stay in the rain for a minute. After all, it brought us together. It feels fitting. So they stood there, getting slowly damp, smiling at each other like the lovesick fools they were. Around them, other pedestrians hurried past, seeking shelter. But Harrison and Aurora remained, solid and certain, proof that sometimes the storms in life brought unexpected gifts. Sometimes they brought love that lasted. Sometimes they brought everything. Years later, when Amelia was a teenager and Henry was heading toward his teenage years, Aurora would tell them the story of how she met their father. She would describe the rain, the exhaustion, the moment a stranger stopped to help when she needed it most. The kids had heard the story dozens of times, but they never tired of it. So Dad gave you his umbrella and you fell in love, Amelia would summarize, romantic even at 14. Not immediately, Aurora would correct, but that umbrella was the beginning. It was a thread connecting us, and when I came back to return it, we started weaving something bigger, something that became this family, this life. That's actually kind of romantic, Henry would admit reluctantly, at an age where admitting anything was romantic was social suicide. Harrison would always add his own part, usually while helping with dinner or checking homework. The umbrella was just an excuse. I would have found a way to see your mother again no matter what. She was too extraordinary to let slip away. And Aurora would catch his eye across the kitchen, remembering that rainy night, that first lunch, the 1,000 moments that had built their love into something unshakable. She thought about the girl she had been, working 3 jobs and drowning in responsibility, unable to imagine a life beyond mere survival. That girl would never have believed she could end up here, in this beautiful home with this incredible family, living a life beyond her wildest dreams. But that girl had also been brave enough to accept help when it was offered, brave enough to take a chance on a man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, brave enough to believe she deserved happiness. The umbrella had been returned a week after the storm, but its impact lasted a lifetime. It was a symbol now, woven into their family story. When Amelia went through her first heartbreak, Aurora gave her a delicate necklace with a tiny umbrella charm. When Henry graduated high school with honors, Harrison bought him a high-quality umbrella and told him to carry it always, because you never knew when someone might need shelter. The umbrella represented the truth they lived by. That kindness mattered, that small gestures could change everything, that love could bloom even in the darkest storms. Aurora often thought about that night, standing in the rain and feeling like the world was too heavy to bear. She had been at her breaking point, unable to see any way forward. And then a car had pulled up beside her, and a man had offered her an umbrella, and everything had changed. Not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily, surely, one day at a time. Harrison had helped her rebuild her life into something beautiful. He had loved her through her grief, celebrated her triumphs, stood beside her through every challenge and joy, and she had done the same for him. Harrison had been successful but lonely when they met, married to his work because he had never found anyone worth coming home to. Aurora had shown him what it meant to have a true partner, someone who saw past the wealth and status to the man underneath. She had given him a family, a home filled with love and laughter, a reason to leave the office at a reasonable hour. They had saved each other, really. Two people caught in their own storms, finding shelter in each other. As their 20th wedding anniversary approached, Harrison started planning something special. Aurora knew he was up to something because he kept sneaking off to make phone calls and smiling mysteriously when she asked what he was doing. "You'll find out soon enough," was all he would say. The surprise turned out to be a vow renewal ceremony, intimate and beautiful, held in their garden where fairy lights were strung between trees just like at their wedding. Their children stood beside them, Amelia at 15 and Henry at 13, both looking grown up in formal clothes. 20 years ago, Harrison said during his vows, his eyes locked on Aurora, "You returned my umbrella and changed my life forever. You were worried it took you a week to bring it back, but I had been hoping every single day that you would come. Because even in that brief encounter during the storm, I knew there was something special about you. And I've spent every day since then grateful that you walked into my office and gave me a chance. Aurora, you are my heart, my home, my everything. Here's to 20 more years and 20 more after that, and however many more we're given. I will love you through all of them." Aurora's vows were equally heartfelt, speaking of the man who had seen her potential when she couldn't see it herself, who had loved her through her darkest days and celebrated her brightest moments. "You gave me shelter when I needed it most," she said, tears streaming down her face. "And you've been my safe harbor ever since. I love you, Harrison. Today, tomorrow, always." Their children stood witness as they renewed their promises to each other, and Aurora felt the circle complete itself. From that rainy night to this moment, from exhausted girl to fulfilled woman, from strangers to soulmates, it was a journey worth taking, a storm worth weathering. The party afterward was full of friends and family, people who had watched Harrison and Aurora build their life together. Daniel gave a toast about how Harrison had been insufferable before meeting Aurora, counting down the days until she might return the umbrella like a lovesick teenager. "We all knew he was gone for her after that first lunch," Daniel said, raising his glass. "He came back to the office looking like he'd been hit by lightning. Best thing that ever happened to him, and he knew it." Sophie added her own toast about how Aurora had brought warmth and humanity to their social circle, teaching them all that success wasn't just about wealth, but about building meaningful connections and living with purpose. Later, when the party had wound down and the kids were with friends for the night, Harrison and Aurora stood in their garden under the fairy lights, swaying to music only they could hear. "Happy?" Harrison asked. "Incredibly." "You?" more than I can put into words." He kissed her forehead. "Thank you for coming back that day, for returning the umbrella, for giving us a chance. Thank you for offering it in the first place, for seeing me when I felt invisible." They danced in the soft glow of the lights, two people who had found each other during a storm and built something beautiful in its wake. The umbrella had been returned long ago, but its impact rippled through every aspect of their lives. Their children grew up hearing the story, understanding that small acts of kindness could change everything. They learned from their parents what real love looked like: partnership built on mutual respect, support, and unwavering commitment. When they were older and building their own lives, they would carry these lessons forward, creating their own stories of love and connection. As for Harrison and Aurora, they continued writing their story day by day, year by year. They traveled, celebrated milestones, weathered new storms together. When Aurora's business expanded to include a mentorship program for young designers from disadvantaged backgrounds, Harrison supported her fully, proud of her commitment to giving others the opportunities she had fought so hard to achieve. When Harrison's father passed away and he inherited even more responsibility with the company, Aurora was his rock, helping him navigate the complex emotions and business decisions. They remained partners in the truest sense, facing everything as a team. The umbrella from that fateful night held a place of honor in their home, displayed in a shadow box with a small plaque that read, "Where it all began." It was a reminder of where they had come from, how far they had traveled together. On quiet evenings, when the kids were occupied and work was done, Harrison and Aurora would sit together and talk about everything and nothing. These were the moments Aurora treasured most, the ordinary intimacy of a life fully shared. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if it hadn't rained that night?" Aurora asked once. "Sometimes, but I like to think we would have found each other eventually. Maybe you would have walked into one of my factories needing design work. Maybe we would have ended up in line together at a coffee shop. The universe wanted us together. The rain just expedited the process." "That's very romantic for a businessman. You bring out my romantic side." Aurora laughed, settling against his shoulder. "Good, I like your romantic side." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their garden, the same garden where they had renewed their vows, where their children played, where countless memories had been made. This was the life that had grown from a single act of kindness on a rain-soaked street. When people asked Aurora for advice about love, about building a lasting relationship, she always came back to that night. "Let people help you," she would say. "Don't be so afraid of appearing weak that you push away genuine kindness. And when someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them." Harrison could have just driven past me that night. He could have offered the umbrella and then forgotten about me. But he didn't. He saw me, really saw me, and he chose to be present. That's what love is, choosing someone every day, showing up even when it's hard. Harrison's advice was simpler but equally heartfelt. When you find someone who makes you want to be better, who sees your potential and believes in you even when you don't believe in yourself, hold on to them. Fight for them. Love them through the storms and the sunshine. Aurora was drenched and exhausted and at her lowest point when I met her, and she was still the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, because I wasn't seeing her circumstances. I was seeing her soul, her strength, her heart. That's what matters. Their story became something of a legend among their friends and family, a reminder that love could bloom in unexpected places, that timing mattered, that sometimes the worst moments led to the best outcomes. The umbrella became shorthand for kindness, for being open to connection, for believing in the possibility of something more. As the years advanced, and their hair grayed and laugh lines deepened around their eyes. Harrison and Aurora remained as devoted to each other as they had been in those early days. They had weathered real storms together, financial stresses and health scares and the normal challenges of raising a family. But through it all, they had each other. On their 30th anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party. Amelia, now a successful architect, and Henry, a teacher working with underprivileged youth, had coordinated the event together, inviting everyone who mattered. The centerpiece of the party was a video montage, interviews they had conducted with friends and family about Harrison and Aurora's relationship. Daniel talked about the umbrella incident, laughing about how Harrison had checked his office window obsessively for days, hoping to see Aurora return. Sophie spoke about how Aurora had taught her that vulnerability was strength, not weakness. The kids shared their own perspectives, talking about growing up watching their parents model real love and partnership. Then came a surprise guest, a young woman Aurora didn't immediately recognize. She introduced herself as Melissa, one of the first mentees from Aurora's design program. "Mrs. Edwards gave me a chance when no one else would," Melissa said in the video. "I was working 3 minimum wage jobs just trying to survive, and she offered me a scholarship and mentorship. She saw something in me I couldn't see in myself, the same way Mr. Edwards saw something in her. They taught me that we all need someone to believe in us, and then we need to pay that forward. Because of them, I now run my own firm and have my own mentorship program." Their love created ripples that changed lives, including mine. Aurora cried through the entire video, and Harrison held her hand, his own eyes suspiciously bright. When it ended, Amelia stood to give a toast. "Mom and Dad, you've shown Henry and me what marriage should look like. Not perfect, because nothing is perfect, but real. Built on friendship and respect and choosing each other every single day. You've taught us that love isn't just a feeling but a series of actions, of showing up and doing the work and believing in each other's potential. Dad, you gave Mom an umbrella when she needed shelter. Mom, you gave Dad a reason to leave the office and actually live. Together, you built something beautiful. Thank you for being the example we needed. Here's to 30 more years." The party was perfect, full of love and laughter and the kind of joy that comes from being surrounded by people who genuinely care. At one point, Harrison pulled Aurora onto the dance floor, and everyone else cleared space to watch them. 30 years, Aurora said as they swayed together. "Where did the time go? Into building this," Harrison gestured around them at their children and friends, at the life they had created. "Into loving you, worth every moment. Even the hard moments, especially those. The hard moments taught us how strong we are together." As they danced, Aurora thought about that young woman standing in the rain, crying and hopeless and utterly alone. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be okay, that the man stepping out of the expensive car with an umbrella was about to change her entire life. That in 30 years, she would be standing in a room full of love, married to her best friend, proud of the life they had built together. But maybe that girl wouldn't have believed it. Maybe she needed to live through it, to experience each moment, to build her faith in love one day at a time. The umbrella had been returned a week after the storm, but the love it sparked lasted a lifetime. It grew and evolved, weathering its own storms and celebrating its own sunshine, but never wavering in its foundation. Harrison and Aurora had found each other when they both needed exactly what the other had to offer, and they had been wise enough, brave enough to hold on. In the end, it wasn't the wealth or the success or the big romantic gestures that mattered most. It was the small moments, the everyday choices, the consistent showing up. It was Harrison bringing Aurora coffee before her morning meetings, and Aurora leaving encouraging notes in his briefcase. It was supporting each other's dreams, parenting as a team, choosing laughter over anger during disagreements. It was being each other's shelter in every storm. Years later, when their story was passed down to grandchildren, it would be told with the same wonder and romance as any fairy tale. But unlike fairy tales, this story was true. Two real people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who were brave enough to take a chance, who built something lasting from a single act of kindness. The umbrella eventually wore out, its mechanism breaking after decades of display. But Harrison had it professionally preserved, the fabric mounted in a new shadow box with photos from that rainy night, from their wedding, from key moments throughout their decades together. It hung in their home, a testament to where they had started and how far they had come. Aurora would sometimes stand in front of it, remembering, not just the rain and the exhaustion, but the hope that had sparked when a stranger stopped to help, the courage it had taken to return to his office, the way her heart had raced when he asked her to dinner. Every choice, every moment, every decision that had led to this beautiful, complicated, perfect life. And she would smile, grateful beyond measure that she had been caught in a storm, that Harrison had been driving past at exactly the right moment, that she had been brave enough to come back. That week between receiving the umbrella and returning it had been full of hope and fear, wondering if she was imagining the connection, if someone like him could really be interested in someone like her. But Harrison had been hoping every single day that she would return, counting the hours, checking his schedule to make sure he would be available if she came. The billionaire had been hoping she would come back, and when she did, both their lives changed forever. That was the real magic of their story. Not the wealth or the romance or the perfect ending, but the simple fact that two people chose each other, continued choosing each other, and built something real from a foundation of kindness and hope. The umbrella had been returned. But the love it sparked would last forever, rippling out through their children and their children's children, a legacy of choosing connection over isolation, vulnerability over protection, love over fear. And it had all started with a storm, a stranger, and an umbrella offered without expectation of anything in return, except maybe, hopefully, the chance to see her smile again.